This is Can You Relate with Christine, but it's less can you relate and more can you relate with Christine.
Hurt people hurt people. You grow through what you go through. You need to feel it to heal it. If you name it, you tame it. These are very cliche sayings in the healing and spiritual community, whether it's through coaching, whether it's through therapy. If you're doing the work on yourself, you're bound to come across one of these sayings. Now, healing. Healing is one of the most challenging, heartbreaking, and mind-shattering experiences. Healing is also one of the most heartwarming, liberating, and loving experiences. It's not for the faint of heart. I want to preface this by admitting that everything that I share is from the level of awareness that I'm at, whether it's through my own healing journey, whether it's things that I've learned as I've worked on myself, by myself, through therapy, through coaching, whether it's my professional experience as a yoga and meditation teacher or as a well-being coach. Everything that I'm sharing is from the level and space that I am at. It doesn't mean that what I'm saying is an absolute truth. It is my truth for the time being. It's things that I have learned through experience, through reflection, through transformation, through ego deaths, all of these things. And these are things that could continue to be life lessons that are just refreshed from now until the day I die. Or they could be lessons that a week from now I experience something and then everything is turned upside down, everything does a 180, and I'll be back here sitting, talking, and sharing new reflections. What I'm sharing, take it with not a grain, with a pound of salt, because these are my experiences, these are my reflections, these are my truths. Healing is not for the faint of heart. Now, when I talk about healing, there are so many topics and subtopics that I could go on an endless rant about. But there are just a few key things that I want to share because I feel like there's a lot of misconceptions about healing. Now, a lot of people, from my experience, again, this is not an absolute truth, this is just from my experience. A lot of people, they want to start healing and they take the first few steps towards their healing journey, get overwhelmed, and then they relapse back into old thought and behavior patterns. It's not wrong, it's not right, it just is what it is. A lot of people want so badly to start their healing journey or want so badly to be healed that they make it their personality traits. They revolve everything about their personality, about their thoughts, about their behaviors around the idea of healing more than the actual act of healing, or more, not the act, more the actual process of healing. It becomes more about the idea and the potential of healing than the actual healing that's being done. And I'm guilty of being one of these people because this is how I started my healing journey. I wanted so badly to just come out on the other end of it thinking that it's a one and done thing. It's not a one and done thing. It's a lifelong thing. So I wanted so badly to be healed that I fell into certain traps. I fell into the trap of the ego identity of I'm in my healing journey. I fell into the trap of toxic positivity. I fell into the trap of spiritual bypassing and emotional bypassing. So spiritual bypassing, I've done a podcast episode about it before where I talk about the topic of spiritual bypassing and toxic positivity in length, but I'm just gonna give you just like a general idea about what it is. So spiritual bypassing is when you use spirituality as a means to bypass your emotions or as a means to bypass the situation. So it's kind of like a cop-out or it's kind of like an excuse. So if, for example, it could be something happens and instead of letting yourself feel sad or feel frustrated or feel angry at things not going your way, you bypass your emotions under the guise of spirituality. So it could seem something like, oh, well, everything happens for a reason. And in doing so, you're invalidating your own emotional experiences. You are just sweeping all of your emotions under the rug, you're compartmentalizing them, and you are going to be an emotional ticking time bomb. That is basically spiritual and emotional bypassing, where you bypass your emotions under the guise of spirituality or under the guise of, for example, I'm a spiritual person, so it's not my place to get upset if something happens because I'm supposed to be Zen. I'm supposed to be enlightened. I'm an enlightened person. I'm a diplomatic person. I'm a nice person. I'm not supposed to, or I should not get frustrated. I should not express myself if it's going to bother other people. I should not 1, 2, 3. So this identity that you end up creating becomes a way for your ego to invalidate itself, becomes a way for you to invalidate your own emotional experiences, to invalidate your own human experience, all under the guise of spirituality or enlightenment. And I've learned the biggest way to like identify when this comes up is at any given moment in time. Whenever you find yourself separating yourself from others, whether it's they're superior to me and I'm inferior, or it's I'm superior to them and they're inferior, they don't know what they're talking about. Anytime there is a separation between you and any person or any group of people, separation equals ego. So this has been kind of like my little hack of identifying whenever my ego comes out. And when I notice this thing, when I notice that my mind is creating this sense of separation between me and someone else, whether they're wrong, I'm right, whether it's they don't know what they're talking about, I know better, I have more experience, I'm older, I have more credentials or expertise or whatever it may be, it's the same thing, whatever you want to call it, it's the same excuse to create the sense of separation. Whenever this sense of separation kicks in, that's when I realize like, oh, okay, wait, let me take a step back. What's going on here? What is being triggered? Why am I making a mountain out of a molehill? Why am I making things personal? Now, another thing that I have learned about healing is that while it is a subjective experience, it is not personal. Healing is subjective. My healing process, journey, experience is completely different than yours. But it is not personal because the way that you respond, the way that you react has nothing to do with me. The way that I respond, react, or project in my experiences or my interactions with you has nothing to do with you. It's not personal to you, it's subjective to me. The same situation is, not could, is definitely going to be internalized or experienced differently depending on the person who is witnessing it or depending on the person who is experiencing it. So when I say that it is subjective, it's because I am experiencing it through the lens of my ego, through the lens of my emotional experiences, through the lens of my limiting beliefs. So it's subjective because I'm experiencing it through a lens that is unique to me. It is not personal because how you interact with me has nothing to do with me, but has everything to do with you. And the way that I interact with you has nothing to do with you and has everything to do with me. Because the way that I interact, the way that I think, the way that I behave has everything to do with what is going on inside my mind. So that is the catch-22. I don't know if I used that properly, but let's just assume that I did. That's the catch-22 about healing, is that it is both a subjective and non-personal or impersonal experience. Hurt people hurt people. When you are hurt, when you have insecurities and fear, not when, we all have insecurities and fears, but when you're operating from a space of insecurities and fears, when you're having an interaction with someone and an insecurity or a fear or a doubt or whatever got triggered within you because of that person's behavior, whether it was directed towards you or you just happened to observe them, interacting with someone else, or you just happen to observe them just being themselves, just doing something that has nothing to do with you, but somehow it triggered something inside of you. You might get frustrated, you might get cranky, you might lash out at that person or at just a random person that just happens to be in the wrong place at the wrong time. Because you are hurting, you hurt other people. And from my experience, it's not intentional that you want to hurt them. You just lash out. They just happen to be in the wrong place at the wrong time in the line of fire. Now, you could also consciously decide, you know what, I don't like what's happening with them. I want to hurt them. You might feel that you're getting some sort of justice or revenge by hurting other people. But at the end of the day, hurt people hurt people. So if someone says something to hurt you intentionally, or if someone says something unintentionally hurting you, it has nothing to do with you. If you take it personally, it's because you also have something that's being triggered. But whatever anyone else says or does has nothing to do with you. And the moment I started to realize that, so I understand it on a mental level, but it took a while for me to be able to embody it, to really feel it in my bones, you know? So when I started to really feel it in my bones, it just changed the way that I experience interactions with people. So if something happens and it doesn't go the way that I expected, or I get disappointed, or whatever it may be, yes, I notice the emotional experiences that are happening. I allow myself to feel whatever it is that is coursing through me, whether it's disappointment, whether it's sadness, whether it's hurt, whatever it may be. I allow myself to feel it, and I see, okay, what is subjective about this experience? What part of it has to do with me? And I do my part. I show up for myself in the best way that I can, whether that means advocating for myself, speaking up, whether that means expressing how I was hurt or expressing how I feel. Whatever I need to do for myself, I do it. But then there's the other half, which has nothing to do with me, which is not personal, which is about the other person experiencing something, about the other person going through something, about the other person's capacity or level of consciousness, or wherever it is that they are at in this moment in time. So when something happens, I let myself feel sad, and I tend to myself. That's the only thing that I can do. And there's something very liberating about that, because you realize that no matter how hard you try to keep someone in your life, you're never going to be able to say or do the right things to keep them in your life, because maybe they're not ready to continue having you in their life. Maybe they're not ready to be able to show up or to continue showing up in the way that you want them to, or in the way that you expect them to, or in the way that you are showing up for them. So yes, it's easy to internalize it. Yes, it's easy to take it as a story in your mind. Yes, it's easy to create a meaning of, okay, if they loved me, they would have stayed. Or if they cared about me, they would have made the effort. It's very easy to default into that kind of narrative in your mind, but it has nothing to do with you. The parts of it that have to do with you, it's your responsibility to tend to those insecurities, to tend to those limiting beliefs, to tend to those wounds that you have. But the part that has nothing to do with you has nothing to do with you. So just wash your hands clean of it and just do you. One of the most challenging things about healing isn't learning new things, learning new thought patterns, new behavior patterns, learning new habits. No, that's not the difficult part. That's not the heartbreaking part. The most heartbreaking part of healing is unlearning everything that you have spent an entire lifetime building a life on. Unlearning every thought, well, not every, but I'm just being dramatic here just to get my point across. Unlearning every thought and behavior pattern that no longer serves you and maybe never served you to begin with. So it's not the learning process that is difficult or heartbreaking. It's the unlearning process, because you are unlearning an entire lifetime's worth of thought and behavior patterns, an entire lifetime's worth of beliefs and convictions and values that may or may not have been your own to begin with. The unlearning process, it's not that it's not discussed, it's not even brought up, not even as a footnote. No one, in my experience, talks about unlearning, or maybe they mention it in passing, but you need to unlearn to be able to have this space, to be able to sit in this space, to be able to bring in new things into this space. So imagine, for example, an apartment. You have so much shit hoarded in this apartment that there's no more room for you to bring in new stuff, to bring in new furniture, to bring in new paintings, to bring in new accessories, whatever it is that you want to bring in. So you need to move some of the things out to create the space to bring in the new. And this is the exact same process with healing. You cannot introduce new thoughts, new beliefs, new values, new convictions, new behavior patterns, new ways of communicating with yourself. You cannot do any of that if you do not have the space for that. So how do you start? You start by unlearning. This is a lengthy process. This is a challenging process, because effectively what is happening in the unlearning process is an ego death. Ego is all about self-preservation. If you're serious about healing, you need to accept that you are going to undergo not one ego death, not two ego deaths, not even 3, 4, 5 ego deaths. You are going to spend the rest of your life undergoing one ego death after the other, undergoing one process of death and rebirth after the other. And it's not as overwhelming or terrifying or hard as it sounds, because the more you do it, the more it just becomes a part of your lifestyle, the more it becomes a part of your personality, because the shift is that you are now conscious of what's going on. You are now conscious of your thought patterns, of your behavior patterns. You are now conscious when you are making a choice. You're no longer operating from an unconscious level, from the level of your subconscious limiting beliefs or your fears or your insecurities. Now, when something comes up and you're operating from a place of fear, you are now choosing to operate from a place of fear. That is the difference between being on your healing journey and being not on your healing journey. You are unconscious of what's going on in your life. You realize that you're just running on autopilot. That is when you are not in the healing process or journey of your life, or in the healing era. It's not an era, it's a lifetime. Okay, it's a lifestyle. Healing is a lifestyle. So when you are healing, when you switch to the healing lifestyle, you're no longer on autopilot. You are now conscious. You are now aware. You now have a choice. You are now choosing things. Sometimes it does get a little overwhelming, because I catch myself getting triggered by something, for example. And then my automatic response is, okay, wait, let me see why I'm getting triggered. Let me dig into the subconscious and understand why I'm being bothered by this, or why I reacted in this specific way, etc. And sometimes it just feels like a lot of hard work, okay? And some days I just don't want to put in that hard work. Some days I just want to be like, you know what? Fuck it. I feel upset. I'm just gonna feel upset. I don't want to understand why I feel upset. But the difference now is that it's a choice. Okay, fine. I got it out of my system. Okay. Now what's the next step? What's the best way to respond? How am I going to choose to move forward instead of operating on autopilot? So healing some days could feel very much like too much work. Some days it might feel as effortless as breathing. But as long as you are conscious of what you are choosing to do or not do, how you are choosing to behave or not behave, you have a say in your life. And now, because healing involves a lot of unlearning and a lot of letting go of what you thought, how you behaved, a big chunk of it is unlearning. There's a lot of ego deaths. There's a lot of grief that comes up in the healing journey, process, experience, whatever you want to call it. Whether you are grieving an old version of yourself, whether you are grieving the idea you had for a specific situation or the expectations that you had, there's a lot of grief. There's a lot of forgiveness that a lot of people might not be able to do. A lot of people might not be able to forgive people in their past, or even forgive themselves for how they did or they did not show up for themselves. There is a lot of grief, there's a lot of forgiveness, there's a lot of grace and compassion in the process of unlearning. And this is where a lot of people get stuck, because we haven't really been taught the language of our emotions. So when these emotions come up, we're not fluent in them. We don't know how to communicate with them. We don't know how to speak their language. We don't know how to understand what it is that they're trying to say. So when something comes up, when a specific emotional experience comes up, I have learned that my default coping mechanism has been to process it on a mental level, to intellectualize it. So an emotional experience comes up, I see it as a problem, my mind quickly jumps to looking for a solution. This is how I have in the past intellectualized emotional experiences. And this is something that I learned through therapy when I told my therapist that, okay, let's say sadness keeps coming up. I know that I need to do 1, 2, 3. It's worked for me in the past. So this is what I do every time sadness comes up, but it's not going. It keeps coming up. It's not being resolved. Why is this happening? Because I'm not letting myself feel the sadness. It comes up and I just want to rush to the other side. I just want to solve it. I want to resolve it to be able to move past it. So I realized that when an emotional experience comes up for me, I tend to intellectualize it. I perceive it from the level of my mental body instead of embodying it and experiencing it from the level of my emotional body. Because mentally, the mind sees a problem or what it perceives as a problem and just wants to solve it. But emotionally, the emotional body experiences something and needs to sit with it, needs to integrate, needs to feel through it. That's why they say you feel it, you heal it. There's a big lag between the mental body and the emotional body, and this is where I have in the past fallen into the trap of intellectualizing my emotional experiences and bypassing them. Healing is not an act of doing. Healing is an act of being present with your emotions whenever they come up, however they come up, because the same emotion is never going to manifest itself the exact same way any single time, not every single time, any single time. You are never going to feel the same sadness about the exact same situation in the exact same way. And this is a big slap in the face, because I used to think that, okay, now that I understand my emotions a bit better, I know what to do when they come up. But it's not the same, because managing your emotions, feeling them, sitting with them, processing them, whatever you want to call it, looks different every single time. It's not one size fits all. It's not a one and done experience of, okay, I know what to do now, so I'm going to copy paste this to every single emotional experience. It really is just figuring out on the go. But the important thing is, the most important thing is that you just show up however you can, whenever you can, to the best of your ability. You just show up. Healing is not an act of doing. Healing is an act of being. Healing is something that I can go on and on and on and on and on and on and on about, because there's just so much to be said about the topic. It's a very beautiful topic. It's also a very heartbreaking topic. It's a lifelong topic. And because there is so much unlearning to do, because there are so many wounds that run so deep, you have no other choice but to feel everything and to feel it many times over before it starts to feel lighter, before it starts to no longer feel like a mountain, but it starts to feel like a molehill. It's a part of you. It's never going to go away. You're not going to wake up one day and be magically healed and enlightened. No, it's a lifelong journey. So if you are someone who is ready, willing, and able to commit to a lifelong journey of improving the quality of your relationship with yourself, improving the quality of your relationship with the world outside you, with the people around you, improving the quality of your human experience, healing is it. It's not for the faint of heart. It's very easy to start your healing journey and to relapse into past thought and behavior patterns. It's so easy for you to start your healing journey and to create a whole new ego identity. It's so easy for you to start your healing journey and just end up experiencing it on a mental level instead of embodying it. There are a lot of traps. Healing is not linear. There's a lot of ups and downs. It looks different from one day to the next, from one emotional experience to the next. But fuck, do you feel alive? Do you really feel like you are living, like every part of you is alive? You're not on autopilot. You're not just existing in your life. You are alive. Every part of you is alive. The good parts, the not so good feeling parts. It's just all the same thing. It's two sides of the same coin. I'm gonna wrap it up here. Otherwise, again, it can go on for hours. But if you enjoyed this episode, please like, share, comment, follow, subscribe, whatever you need to do. It really helps support the podcast and pushes the content out. On that note, I'll see you next time.